So today I'm going to be talking about equity, and the title of the talk is Answering Our Children's Questions, Our Unique Role in Leading for Equity. Before I start, I would like to dedicate this talk to my amazing C7 cohort family. You all literally keep me inspired and hopeful. Thank you so much. So I thought, what better way to start off this talk than with my favorite drink as of late.
As of late.
I don't know about you, but this has been a day, a week, a year. It's been a lot. And I find myself sometimes really trying to hold on to hope and energy. I'm tired. In fact, I'm going to disclose something to you. This morning I woke up and I had one contact lens. I have no idea what happened to the other contact lens. So as I give this talk, just know that I can see it of this eye. I cannot see it of this eye. If I start squinting, I'm not getting fresh. I literally can't see. It's been a Red Bull kind of year. How many of you have interacted with or have children of your own who are this age or have been this age? These are my 3 children. So there's Ari in the middle. He's 11. In the pink shirt is my 6-year-old Azaria. She's in 1st grade. And then the little one on the end with a little mischievous smile is my pre-K child, Abrielle. And if you know anything about kids at this age group, like they ask 1,000 questions. Questions don't stop. Some questions are provocative, some are inappropriate. For example, this morning when I was taking my kids to school and we were riding in the lift, Abrielle, who every time I just see her looking, I'm like, please don't open your mouth and ask a question right now. She was getting ready to ask a question. I could see the glint in her eye, and she asked our Lyft driver, "Are you a man or a woman?" He laughed, and I appreciated that. And then I told her to quickly, shh, stop. Then I had this meta conversation with myself around like gender dynamics and sex, and like why does my child think that there are only like 2 categories, and what am I doing as a mother? And so you can see why I need the Red Bull, because these are the kinds of things that I think about all the time. This is my beautiful baby Azaria. Lately, she has been asking the most profound questions. Her questions balance inquiry and empathy in a way that jars me sometimes. Questions like, "Mommy, why is that man on the street?" Questions like, "Why don't we bring him some food?" Questions that illuminate to me how as adults we have lost so much of the genuine inquiry and empathy that we should be constantly engaging in. Children do this effortlessly. Adults, we somehow lose it along the way. My sister's going to kill me for showing this picture because she is in her underwear, but we're just going to move forward from that. I'm not in underwear, so I figured it was appropriate to share. This is my younger sister, Judy, and myself, and this picture was taken in a place called Happy Valley Goose Bay, Labrador, which is where we lived for the first 9 years of my life. It's where we lived. My mother met my stepfather, who was in the U.S. Air Force. He's from Guam, a wonderful man named Cheryl Camacho. He got married to her and then moved us to this amazing place called Thomasboro, Illinois, which is a town of approximately 1,900 people. Currently, it's 93% white, and it's become more diverse over time. So as you can imagine, going to school and growing up in that community came with a variety of challenges. I'm going to share a story with you. So my sister and I were very different people. We always have been. Even though I love her very dearly, we're just very different, always have been. For example, she was always this really scrawny like bundle of energy that would bounce around like from park to playground to friend's house in the summer. I preferred an armchair, air conditioning, Nintendo, Nancy Drew books. And she had this long, flowing, curly hair that just expressed all of her energy and joy for life. I didn't have that. So we also both wore glasses. That's something we did have in common. And approximately 3 weeks before what I'm about to share with you, she had joyfully and gleefully picked out these amazing, snazzy red glasses. She was excited. Mine were neutral, but hers were red and snazzy. So one day, I was sitting in the armchair, enjoying a game of Contra on my Nintendo, and I heard a commotion at the door. My sister was standing there, and I will never forget this moment. She was my beautiful sister with all of her life and joy and passion, was covered in spit. Her glasses were covered in spit. And I remember looking at my little sister and feeling such pain and feeling so powerless. I was her big sister. How could this happen to her? Her and one of her friends, who's half Chinese, were playing, and two white boys on bicycles chased them, calling them nigger, chink, and spit all over them. I took her into the bathroom. I cleaned off her glasses. I held her. I sat with her. I sat in her pain with her. And my parents ended up calling the police to file a report. Nothing ever really happened or came out of that. But I will never forget how hard it was for me to sleep that night, and how angry I was. I felt something that I had never actually felt before, which was hate. I went to sleep that night thinking of all the ways that I could enact revenge on these boys. And when I woke up the next morning, still cloaked in all of that anger, my sister came up to me with her characteristic smile and said, "Hey, you want to go outside and ride bikes?" To which, of course, I didn't, because that would require too much energy. But I invited her to watch me play Contra, which she also loved to do. She's my biggest fan. And as she sat there watching me play Contra, I asked her quietly, "Judy?" "Yes." "Are you okay?" "I'm going to be." In that moment, I learned a lot about internal power. So my program took us on this fabulous trip to Washington, D.C. not too long ago. And one of the perks of the trip for me was visiting the African American Museum. Tickets are really hard to come by. I'm not like a big plan ahead person, so the chances of me ever getting there were pretty slim. But thankfully, our professor, Dr. Deborah Jules Sherman, arranged for us to go and visit and to experience this rich, rich asset in DC's community. And I remember feeling excited and joyous and interested, but I also felt like this tension with, like, oh gosh, can I really do this? I'm going to see stuff in here that I really don't want to see. Can I handle it? So as I moved through the museum, if you've been, you know that you start out at the bottom and you move your way up to the different floors. And the bottom is all about the beginning of African slavery. And the things that you see down there are really, really challenging. And as you move up, you see different aspects of the rich and amazing and powerful and beautiful history of Black people in the United States. But I remember making a conscious decision to do this alone. I didn't want to walk around with anybody. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I just wanted to be by myself. And I remember being absolutely jarred by some of the things that I saw there, like leg irons for children. I imagined my children's legs in those irons. The thing that was hardest for me, though, was looking at the auction block and reading a description of what happened and what transpired. And I'm going to read it to you, even though I'm like squinting because I can't quite see with one contact in, so I'm going to turn around a little bit. After the men were all sold, they then sold the women and children. They ordered the first woman to lay down her child and mount the auction block. She refused to give up her little one and clung to it as long as she could, while the cruel lash was applied to her back for disobedience. She pleaded for mercy in the name of God, but the child was torn from the arms of its mother. Amidst the most heart-rending shrieks from the mother and child on the one hand, and the bitter oaths and cruel lashes from the tyrants on the other. Finally, the poor child was torn from the mother, while she was sacrificed to the highest bidder. In this way, the sale was carried on from beginning to end. It's a true story. And I couldn't help, as I sat and looked at that block where people had actually stood and been sold and had their children ripped out of their hands, I thought about being a mother. And I thought about how I felt when I gave birth to my children. And how with the birth of each child, I looked at them with a combination of joy and fear, of hope and pain, because I know that the world is not quite deserving of these amazing children that we have in our midst. As I sat and grappled with that, I had a physical reaction. My head was spinning, I felt sick to my stomach, and I could feel like myself involuntarily start to tear up. And I sat in that pain, and it was really, really hard to hold on to empathy in that moment because I wanted to slip into hate. And then I continued to ascend up the museum, and I got to the part that I loved best, which was the art. I'm not an artist. My sister is actually the artist in our family, but I've always loved art. I've always been inspired by it. There's something about art that is so resilient, and so often when you read about artists and people who create amazing works of art, you learn about really deep and powerful things that they've experienced and survived through. And the same thing happened when I was in the museum looking at this. I was struck by the amazing resilience of Black people in our country, and I was struck by the hope of what this art represented. All throughout the museum, there are quotes on the walls, and I took probably about 1,000 pictures when I was there, a lot of different things. But this quote was one that stood out to me, and as I left, I reflected on it a lot. I still am actually reflecting on it. History, despite its wrenching pain, cannot be unlived, but if faced with courage, need not be lived again. We have a responsibility as leaders, as my professor, Dr. Deborah Jewel Sherman says, as equity warriors, we have a responsibility to not only answer the questions that our children ask us, to think about the questions that they ask us, but to ask some of those same questions ourselves. It is our responsibility as equity leaders to lead with that lens of both inquiry and empathy. This is the skyline of Boston. This past weekend, I was in a hotel with my girls, and we had a full day of going to the pool repeatedly. If they love the pool, we could be in a box, and if there's a pool, they don't care. We went to the pool, we ordered room service, we went shopping, we had a really fun day. And I was tired at the end of the day. It had been a long week, and it was a longer weekend, and I was exhausted. But I looked out of my window at the skyline of Boston, and I felt inspired. I felt hope. I hope that as you all move forward in your leadership roles, that you always hold on to this idea that you must always ask questions. You must ask questions that balance inquiry, real inquiry, not assumption, and questions that balance empathy. When you can do that, the power is insurmountable. Imagine how different the childhood of my sister and I would be if the boys who had spit on her had known how to approach difference through a line of inquiry and empathy. Imagine how different the trajectory of this country's history would be if people had held on to inquiry and empathy. These two things are critically powerful, and I encourage you and ask you to hold on to those things as you move into the world as leaders. Final words by Dr. Cornel West, who I hear is around here. I hope to meet him someday. America needs citizens who love it enough to reimagine and remake it. This is the charge of being an equity leader. Thank you.